We're joined by Jonathan Pogash, an internationally renowned mixologist, educator, and founder of the Cocktail Guru. So our three key takeaways: number one, how are Italian wines and spirits offering a versatile flavor palette for traditional and innovative cocktails, why aperitivo culture and spritz culture is so popular today, and how regional Italian products and maybe more niche products, both in the wine and spirit side, can fit into modern cocktail programs. Hello, welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market with me, your host, Juliana Colangelo. This show has been designed to demystify the US market for Italian wineries through interviews with experts in sales and distribution, social media, communications, and so much more. We will quiz each of our esteemed guests in every episode to solidify the lessons that we've learned from the episode. So sharpen your pencils, get out your notebooks, and join us this week to learn more about the US market. Hello, and welcome to Masterclass US Wine Markets on the Italian Wine Podcast. Today, we're joined by Jonathan Pogash, an internationally renowned mixologist, educator, and founder of the Cocktail Guru. Jonathan is a leading voice in the cocktail world, known for consulting with top hospitality brands, creating award-winning beverage programs, and sharing his expertise on the art and science of drink making. In today's episode, we're going to explore how Italian wines and spirits are playing a starring role in cocktails today, and what trends are shaping the next wave of Italian-inspired mixology. Jonathan, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here.
It is so great to be here. Thank you so much, Juliana.
Absolutely. I was just thinking we really haven't covered much on cocktail culture and cocktails. It is the Italian Wine Podcast after all, but it's such an integral part these days. So I'm really excited to dive into this topic with you. But before we get started, tell us a little bit about your background, how you became the Cocktail Guru.
Yes, well, I kind of grew up in the industry. My father has been in the wine business. That's how he started. So I was exposed to fine wines at an early age, and he was kind of one of the very first brand ambassadors of sorts, and he represented all of the wine producers of Alsace. So that was in the 70s and 80s. And then in the 90s, he moved on to the spirits side, working at Moet Hennessy USA as the director of communications. And as I was coming up, I had just finished college. My goal was to be an actor. So I moved to New York City after college to be an actor. And my dad introduced me to his good friend, Gary Regan, or Gaz Regan. And so he became my mentor and taught me all about classic cocktails and how to kind of run your bar and set up your bar. And it gave me enough confidence that when I moved to New York City, I was urged by my dad to get a job in a bar. So my first gig was as a bar back at the Russian Tea Room. So immediately I was kind of thrown into fine dining and introduced to fine wines and wine and spirits, cocktails and all of that. And then, I was auditioning. I was, doing some things here and there in the entertainment industry, but, the hospitality took over. And I think I was seeing that it was sort of coming easy to me, and I was getting hired to just help bars and restaurants open up at that point, and then also to do events for brands, spirit brands. And so I created the Cocktail Guru in 2006 as a little side hustle to the full-time bartending. And then it kind of grew from there. And I met my then fiance, now wife, and we decided to live in New York City for a little while and then moved to southeastern Massachusetts. And I expanded my business, the Cocktail Guru, to be nationwide. And so now I do a lot of traveling. I have a team of people across the country that do events for brands and consulting and development and bar and restaurant programs, that sort of thing.
Very cool. So it seems like the acting maybe got pushed to the side, but I'm sure it still comes into play in your role today, Jonathan. Those skills don't go away, as we can tell from your interview skills.
Well, thank you. Yes, and as you know, I do some TV, more like morning television cocktail segments, 7, 8 in the morning, mixing drinks for eager hosts. So yes, it does. It definitely comes into play. And, the improv, I took improv when I was in New York City. And so all of it combined definitely helps out.
Absolutely. So, Jonathan, with your great background in hospitality and all the consulting work you've done, we're excited to learn a little more about cocktail culture today, but more specifically, how are Italian wine and spirits both playing a role in the market? So our three key takeaways: number one, how are Italian wines and spirits offering a versatile flavor palette for traditional and innovative cocktails? Why aperitivo culture and spritz culture is so popular today? and how regional Italian products and maybe more niche products, both in the wine and spirit side, can fit into modern cocktail programs. For starters, let's talk a little bit about your own experience with Italian wine and spirits. When you started at the Russian Tea Room, tell us a little bit about your first exposure and experience working with Italian wine and spirits in cocktail programs.
Yeah, I would say it really started at the beginning at the Russian Tea Room. We had a fairly innovative cocktail program and we had all types of wines from around the world. Prosecco was probably my first introduction, key player in our sparkling wine, in all the sparkling wine cocktails that we were doing there. And I mean, it was like Cure Royales. That was really the drink of choice. And so those drinks were flying off the shelves. French 75, the classic sparkling wine cocktails, Bellini, and we were using the classic peach Bellini mix in a can from Harry's bar in Venice, and it was from Harry Cipriani rather. And so it was quite an introduction for me. And of course, sangrias were hot at that time; they still kind of are. And so those cocktails specifically were what introduced me not only to Italian wines, but just wine in cocktails in general, because that was something that I had never thought of before, really, before starting work behind the bar. I just thought it was two sides, right? Wine with food and cocktails, not even cocktails with food at that point. So combining the two was quite innovative to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And beyond, you mentioned Prosecco and sparkling, of course, in a lot of classic cocktails, and then maybe red wines and sangria. But how have you seen the evolution of Italian wines playing a role in cocktail programs today from when you started off at the Russian Tea Room? What kind of wines, and I guess we can also talk about vermouths and other amari as well. How are they really playing a role in the modern cocktail program?
They really are playing quite a significant role. Of course, we mentioned the spritz culture is huge. I mean, you have spritzes being served all over the country. And, I was fortunate enough to take a trip to Italy several years ago and experience the true, aperitivo culture. And that is really coming into the forefront here in the States, as well as the other, top spirits, top Italian spirits, the Amaros, the aperitivos, limoncello. And moving on to the wine side, really trying to figure out what styles of Italian wines work best in specific cocktails. So, for instance, Prosecco has a wide range of dryness, a scale of dryness. So trying to pinpoint, which Proseccos work best in what types of cocktails, but also red wines, Italian red wines, Amarones and Lambruscos. So Amarone typically has the higher alcohol content and can, stand up to spirits like gin or tequila. And then, of course, Lambrusco, which will add that sort of rich red fruit sweetness without adding any kind of cloying sweetness. So really just giving the effervescence and giving the full body to a cocktail that will kind of tamper down gin and Campari for the American palate, I think.
Right. Yeah, I never thought about Amarone. That's an interesting one, and I think a great way to position that wine is it's as drinkers are moving towards leaner styles in terms of what they want to drink as wine. That's a great way for an Amarone brand to find more relevance in the market today. Do you think that younger bartenders, you mentioned starting off, right after college or so as a bartender yourself, do you think younger bartenders are aware and educated on how to use some of these products in their cocktail program? Or do you think it's still kind of a niche area for the cocktail world?
I mean, the younger bartenders may think that they're educated. And, don't get me wrong, many of them are, but I do think that there is still work to be done. I think we're always learning and we should never stop learning, and that there are always new and innovative trends and ways of utilizing products. So I think specifically Italy and wines, there's absolutely work to be done. There are tons of young bartenders that are eager for that education and to be able to know how to use the products in cocktails in their own programs. And they may be intimidated by Italian wines. And I think kind of getting rid of that barrier and showing them that it's easier than they may think
Right.
to utilize those products.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Italian wine can certainly be intimidating, starting with the label and, the DOC, DOCG, IGT, all the different levels and variations. How important do you think those designations of region, of classification are in Italian wine when it comes to incorporating them into a cocktail program?
I think it's very important. I do DOC, DOCG, like you said, terroir designations. I think knowing that the region is confident and stands behind the products that they're putting out, and that they are of the highest quality, high quality enough to have those designations. I don't want anything other than those products in my cocktails, or I don't want my guests, the consumer, the end consumer, to consume those products. I want to be able to provide them the best possible ingredients. And so, terroir, soil, all of this has an effect on the product itself, and to be able to allow the guests that insight, right? The education, you're kind of gently educating your guests as well.
Right.
And so to be able to, yeah, to be able to provide the best quality ingredients is definitely at the forefront for everything that I do.
Yeah. And that just speaks to your earlier point about the importance of education for the bartenders about wine, right? It might not be the most obvious trade audience that a brand marketer might think of for a wine brand, but like you said, I mean, to give them the knowledge and the resource of the quality of the product, for how, first off, the terroir might impact how it can fit into a cocktail, but also how they can educate their drinker. I think that's critical. How much do you think there's crossover these days for bartenders who are also not just creating a cocktail program, but perhaps choosing the wines by the glass for a bar program?
There's definitely crossover. Choosing wines can be tricky. And oftentimes, like for bar programs, oftentimes I rely on my father, who has the wine background, because he has, more than 50 years of experience. But for me, I always look towards balance and making sure that the wine program and the cocktail program is as balanced as possible. So wines by the glass, making sure that you're touching multiple regions, old world, new world, various styles, and then utilizing what you already have, what you're already serving by the glass, and putting that in your cocktails and into
Mhm.
your cocktail program as well. Because you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. You're minimizing your inventory, you're minimizing your costs, and you're maximizing the output. And that just makes sense to me. I've worked in so many bars where the lists are so long and we have so many open bottles of different products behind the bar, and things end up going to waste. So I'm a huge proponent of low waste bar programs and wine programs as well. So I think, having a handful of reds, a handful of whites, making sure Italy is in there, making sure that the food that everything complements each other, and that everything is just well balanced.
Yeah, that's a great point, that the versatility of the product, like, positioning it, hey, this is a great by the glass pour, but also could work in this type of cocktail. So that restaurants, especially as space is at a premium and expenses are higher than ever before, they have opportunities to use the product in multiple ways. That makes tons of sense. I think, again, it's maybe not such an obvious tactic for people on the brand side, or maybe some of our listeners in Italy, to think about. So definitely some really cool, interesting tactics to think about. Next, I want to go back to aperitivo and spritz culture. We talked a little bit about that. Obviously, it's become a huge here in the US, and you've probably seen it from the ground up, Jonathan. So tell us a little bit about the role the bartending and cocktail community played in really bringing that Italian spritz aperitivo culture to the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, when I started in bars in 2001, barely anyone knew what a spritz was. I would say, the Bellini and the Key Royale were the top two. And granted, a Key Royale is a spritz. I think I can classify a Bellini kind of in a similar category to a spritz as well. But really, the rise of communication and social media and internet, I think, allowed that culture from Italy to kind of be expanded, because aperitivo hour in Italy is holy almost. I mean, the folks, they're dedicated. They'll go every day. They'll have some food. They'll have their spritz. They'll spend hours, and then they won't eat dinner until 11 o'clock or midnight. And it's a whole thing. And just being able to experience different cultures in the US, I think, is what drove this. And also the simplicity of the drink itself, right? I mean, three ingredients. Some may say equal parts. Some may say, a little bit more club soda or a little bit more prosecco, however it goes. And also the look of the drink itself. So in the US especially, I think we taste way more with our eyes than anything else.
Right.
And just that light pink color, or that light red color of an Aperol spritz, there's something to be said for the presentation. And one of my favorite drinks is a Negroni. And, to many consumers, it's an acquired taste, Campari. I love Campari, but it definitely it's got a higher proof, and it's a little bit more bitter than Aperol. So Aperol has that a lower proof aperitivo in general has, characteristics that the American consumer definitely love and appreciate. And you can have multiple, right? You can have more than one. It's lower proof. You're not going to feel super tipsy afterwards. I'm amazed, even Aperol, to me, for the American consumer, I'm amazed that they've embraced it because it still has a little bit of bitterness to it. And generally, the American palate despises bitterness. But I just think it's sort of the look, the culture, the experience, all of it. It's not just the one specific cocktail itself. It's really just the entire experience.
Right. And Italy is the number one travel destination for Americans. So, like you said, bringing that experience back home after a trip to Italy in the summer, et cetera, that really ties into, I think, that whole experience of the spritz. Jonathan, you mentioned, low alcohol, sessionable. It's not going to get you super tipsy. Obviously, we're seeing a lot more trends in wellness these days and people being conscious of their drinking habits and consumption. How do you think Italian wine and spirits can play a role or, let's say, play into some of these trends of lower alcohol cocktails?
Yeah, it's huge, and many bartenders behind the bar are modifying the way that they drink, which is in turn modifying the way guests at their bars are drinking as well. And also, the pandemic had a huge part because we were definitely consuming a lot of at-home drinks to kind of mask the stress of it all. And then afterwards, now we're kind of like, all right, now we have to grow up a little bit, tone it down, be able to function back at work and back with our families. So yes, especially Italian wines and Italian spirits. I think you've got obviously limoncello, which is a little lower proof and has some really interesting flavor profiles and notes. Amaros, many are, a tad on the higher proof, but you're using it as a modifier. And so you're not using as much of it. And the rise of a drink we call the paper plane, which was invented in New York, I think really highlights Italian spirits to the max capacity. And so that drink itself is a very approachable drink and utilizes some really great products. And of course, Aperol is a little lower proof. And then just Italian wines, still wines, red, white, Prosecco. Obviously, if you use those products as a base ingredient and kind of think of a normal base spirit, which is, your gin, your rum, your vodka, tequila, whatever, as the modifier. So kind of switching your brain a little bit, right? The Italian wine as the base. So more of that ingredient, switching it 2.5 ounces, 3 ounces, 4 ounces of the wine, and maybe half an ounce or 3/4 of an ounce of the higher proof product. Then you automatically have a low ABV product there. And then you've got non-alcoholic Amaros, non-alcoholic aperitivos, non-alcoholic Italian wines, or alcohol-free or alcohol removed. And those products really coming into the forefront because I think the knowledge has grown in the process of it all, in removing the alcohol and allowing it to still taste delicious, almost uncanny, could almost not tell the difference. And using those products in cocktails so that there's zero proof. That has been huge.
Yeah, that's for sure. There's been a huge boom in all those different innovative products out there that are either, like you said, lower alcohol or even zero proof. So lots of opportunities. I love just that basic idea of just switching the ratios, right? And using the base spirit as the complement instead of as the base, combined with a wine or a sparkling wine or aperitif to make that lower alcohol cocktail. Jonathan, I know you're constantly coming up with new creations and cocktails. Are there any cocktails you've done recently with Italian wine and spirits that you're particularly excited about? You even hosted a Venetian dinner at Tales of the Cocktail this year, which was awesome. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're playing with.
That's right. Yes. I was looking back at some of my recipes from the last couple of years, and I'm using Italian wines and Italian spirits quite often. Way more often than I thought. I was recently at Nantucket Wine and Food Festival, and I did cocktail dinner pairing that was White Lotus themed, and kind of exploring all of the regions that the White Lotus has been to, and of course they've been to Italy, and I think that has also added to the trend of Italian spirits and Italian wines. That specific season of White Lotus. But that could be a different conversation. But I did a drink called 2 to 3, which had limoncello, prosecco, coconut soda water. So that's kind of an interesting twist because both of those products, the limoncello and the prosecco, could hold up to kind of a delicate coconut soda water and some fresh herbs. So it was a classic spritz variation, but just with the changing up the flavor of the soda water. So simple. I consult for bars and restaurants across the country. Sometimes they're in cities and sometimes they are literally out in the middle of nowhere. And I was hired to work with a restaurant group that was literally out in the middle of nowhere in Southern Ohio. This was an Italian concept. They had never had any kind of cocktail program before. And I decided to put an Italian margarita on the menu. And they went wild. They said, "Margarita? Italian? This is crazy." And it's literally just a margarita, but splitting the base between tequila and limoncello, which worked out. It was great. And they love it. And then one last one. So I did a pop-up in Las Vegas at the Bellagio. They have this cocktail bar called the Vault. And I did kind of a spicy cinnamon espresso martini variation, but with Amaro, aged rum, and Italian vermouth. And so again, splitting the base between three now. So I did Amaro, aged rum, and sweet vermouth as like a tri-base with fresh espresso. And I did this cinnamon cayenne banana foam on top.
Ooh.
So it's kind of wild, but it shows the dichotomy, the difference between kind of a super niche, fine dining, classic cocktail bar cocktail like that versus an Italian margarita versus a classic spritz and everywhere in between. And of course, I did a Lambrusco drink during Tales of the Cocktail at our spirited dinner. It was kind of a New York sour variation. And classically, a New York sour is whiskey, lemon juice, simple syrup with a red wine float. And so we utilized Riuniti Lambrusco as the float, and it worked out so well. And it really balanced out that cocktail.
That sounds delicious. And not just because it's Riuniti. Stevie's going to kill me for plugging my own product here, but okay.
Uh-oh. I did it. I plugged it. I'm the one who mentioned the name.
Those all sound delicious, and I really want a cocktail. It is 5:30, so maybe we'll have to end this interview now so I can go grab one. Jonathan, what are you seeing on the horizon? You know, we've seen this huge momentum of spritz culture, low alcohol, sessionable. What do you think's next on the horizon in the cocktail world within the Italian wine and spirit space?
Well, I definitely see using a variety of different Italian wines, different reds, different whites, different styles of Prosecco, Lambrusco. I think all of that is something that we can look forward to in the future. I'm a big classics person, so, doing variations on classic cocktails. I always tell the young mixologists and young bartenders who ask, how am I going to create, where should I start when I'm creating cocktails? And I say, start with the classics and then work your way from there. And really, that's how we're going to move forward and how we're going to come up with new drinks, because we've got a great baseline, and it's really, really hard to come up with something completely out of the ordinary, that's completely innovative. But just working with the core classics and working from there, I think is a great way to start.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Jonathan, before we end, we'll do our rapid fire quiz we do at the end of every episode. So if you can do your best to answer these questions in just one or two sentences. Question number one, what is your number one tip for mastering the U.S. beverage alcohol market?
We've talked about it before, education. I would say that that's the number one tip. More specifically, educating the bartender, because they're the gatekeepers. And then by educating the bartenders, you'll be able to educate your consumer and sell more.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Question number two, what is something you might have told your younger professional self? I know sounds like you started off quite young in this industry about working in the beverage alcohol industry.
Not taking myself too seriously in the early days and having more fun. I feel like I'm having more fun now than I ever have before. But early on, I was so serious and I really wanted to make a great impression. But just, being relaxed.
Absolutely. Yeah, having fun with it. It's a fun industry after all. And finally, it sounds like you're traveling around the country quite a bit. What is one of your favorite travel hacks?
I would say trying to work out every day if I can. And what's that?
Ambitious. I mean, every day. Yeah.
I try. It is ambitious. But when you're in a place like New Orleans, you really want to take advantage of the culture, and the food really is a big part of the culture, and you need to take care of yourself.
For sure. Balance. Absolutely. Well, Jonathan, thanks again for joining us on the podcast today. How can our listeners follow along and check out what you're up to?
Yeah, so my website is thecocktailguru.com. We're on Instagram at The Cocktail Guru. I also host a podcast with my father all about hospitality and spirits and wine and cocktails. It's called The Cocktail Guru Show, and it's available everywhere, wherever you watch and listen to podcasts.
All right, fantastic. Thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Juliana.
Thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned each week for new episodes of Masterclass US Wine Market with me, Juliana Colangelo. And remember, if you've enjoyed today's show, hit the like and follow buttons wherever you get your podcasts.